You want to open the meeting?
Welcome, everybody, to our, what is this, April 12th town board work session. We're going to be going over the comprehensive plan. We've got members of the steering committee here. We've got a couple of folks joining us remotely. As I was not part of the comprehensive planning process, just an onlooker, I will hand it over to Deputy Supervisor Bollinger and Councilor Waters to lead us to this work session.
Thank you. So, hello, everybody. So what we wanted to do was give an outline of where we are now. The steering committee, we've gone through 2 years of gathering of information. We had a draft. Steering committee discussed the draft the last week of March, and say 85–90% of it is fine the way it is, but there were some things that we wanted to change before we go to the next iteration. So they did not approve moving the draft forward as it was written, and are going to meet one more time to finalize it with the draft that's going between this one and the one that will come out early in May. There'll be some changes between based on all the input. So we have now received letters from a dozen people with comments. We collected we collected the information from the comments from the steering committee, the notes from the steering committee. Grace, who is with us, has been collecting all of this data to work on amending the draft, but that's not consensus. That's all different people's ideas. So the steering committee's meeting after today is going to be to try to coalesce all those different ideas into a consensus. And our discussion today is our input to that process, where we can say, you know, this part wasn't clear, or I think you should emphasize this more, and they can take that into consideration, but it's still their report. So this is our input toward that report. So I want to introduce Grace real quickly, who is our consultant with Barton & Judas. If you just want to say hi.
Hi, good to see you all. I'm Grace DeSantis from Barton & Judas. I've been helping with the development of the comp plan pretty much since near the beginning of the process. So happy to be a part of it.
And Grace has been our primary writer. So we want to thank you for that. And then we have some members of the steering committee here. So we can start with you, Marissa, if people just want to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Marissa Mims. Nice to meet everyone. If you're them. Nicole Wataki.
Recall.
Hey, Gallery.
John Case.
So these are the members of the steering committee. Okay. And we have audience too. We have Keith is on the Zoom. Can you elevate him? And Bill Kirchhoff also needs to be elevated. He's a
Steering committee member. And Councilor Kreitzel's joining the work session hybrid too. And can you see, and David Newman is joining us.
Okay. So Bill, if you want to say hi, and Keith.
Oh, sorry, I had to unmute myself. Hi, everybody. Thanks for letting me join via Zoom.
Thanks, Bill.
All righty. So Heather's going to read something.
Yeah, one of the things I could add to what Sarah just said is that the steering committee expressed to us that we'd worked for so long gathering that we haven't had enough time with the draft to digest it and make sure that we have time to digest it. So the steering committee meeting was designed to sort of pass this draft to the town board ahead of time, but we really needed one more meeting as they determined. So we're really glad that they're leading us in this way. And we're also, one of the things that was really important was to include an executive summary and a grounding place in context beginning of the document, so that people were oriented to what the heck they were looking at.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to read the original draft that Sarah wrote, but we have a subgroup from the steering committee, including Don Gates, Kay, Leah Krause, I believe too, who are having a conversation and helping us to present something that's a summary. So this is about, the call was to find something to tell our story, what this is about. This is the Town of Manlius Comprehensive Plan. And although the town of Manlius has had a zoning code for many years, it did not have a comprehensive plan to articulate the community's overarching vision, goals, and strategies for future growth, development, and preservation. So we initiated an effort to engage community members, really with the support of the entire town board, in developing a comprehensive plan reflective of priorities set by residents, not developers. Using several outreach techniques, including listening sessions, focus groups, study groups, open houses, and work sessions, all of which were open to the public. The Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee gathered input from all parts of the town. Community members expressed their desire to preserve what we love about the town of Manlius, including open spaces and safe neighborhoods. They shared concerns about flooding, traffic, and suburban sprawl. For future planning, there was support for better bicycle and pedestrian routes, interest in affordable housing, and really aging in place, and questions about a proposed quarry. The steering committee also considered the possible impact of the proposed micron chip fab in clay. Consensus developed around the following goals: environmental protection and sustainability, community character and quality of life, welcoming and healthy neighborhoods, diverse and local commerce, modern transportation networks, responsive government operations. And the comprehensive plan is organized in 3 sections. The first part describes current conditions using census and other data sources to outline current land uses and the demographics of the people in the town of Manlius. The middle of the report is focused on the vision, goals, objectives, and actions to be considered by the town over the next 10 years to achieve these goals. The final section describes a preferred future for the town. This includes not only potential land uses, but also design preferences for site layout and architectural styles. So that's one opening that really needs to be edited and conceived of and worked on by the subgroup of the steering committee, because this is presented by a group of folks, not just the town board. And with that, I'd like to ask the steering committee if there's anything they want to add or present to the town about where we are in the process, before the councilors offer their feedback on the draft.
No, you go. I don't have anything to say at the moment. I'm just gathering my thoughts.
Well, we met a little bit and talked, and we're gonna meet again to go over some more. We just, we were brainstorming and we thought snippet, sort of like a preface to all this is to include, this is a living document, and we were wordsmithing that together. That's very short, very concise, but it's meant to be something that's edited, looked at as climate changes, you know.
Or just even micron coming in.
Yeah.
I think what we heard during the public meeting was that citizens were concerned about, does this lock us in any way? Right? Would you agree with that? I mean,
Absolutely.
right? And that we want to make sure that we're respecting property owners and respecting different interests, but while also taking into account that there's a lot of variables that are happening, right? And an unexpected one was in the last year was micron. But also we have other challenges too. And I think as we look at that, one of the feedback that we got from people was that this document's big, it's comprehensive, literally, but it's also very hard to understand. You know, if you don't know the lingo, you've never looked at census data and whatever, all the information there, it just becomes like a big textbook. You know, who wants to look at their history textbook or science textbook again? So we thought the preface one would just sort of lay out, hey, this is a document for the community, but it's something that hopefully we look back at, I would say once a year, just maybe an informal meeting, say, hey, where are we, how are we doing? Because sometimes these documents just gather dust. And then we did, you know, all the time and effort that was put in by people coming to the meetings, right? We want to respect their views and constantly be addressing because things change. So I guess that's my one thought on that. And what we're also doing is we're going to try to be, as much as our time allows and energy allows, is to really look at the public comments over the past week, and we're still getting more comments in, is my understanding, and sort of take that in and incorporate that into the plan as it is. And also obviously hearing from all of you as well is very important because you're hearing things that we may not hear. So, and again, I think you want to process what we've heard. You said it well, Heather, that there's a lot to take in, and you know, we were looking at it last week and we realized, wow, there's still, you know, it gets overwhelming at times. You need time to digest it.
Totally, yeah. So speaking of digestion, the way we were gonna discuss the format for this evening is to take those three sections that were mentioned in the opening and sort of talk about them in pieces. So the first part we want to talk about is all that census data part. So the first part that was the community conditions as things are now. We did initially, that was written with 2019 data where it was available. That's been updated to the 2020 census, but it's not available for everything. So there's still a few places where it's not, and the footnotes say that, but who reads footnotes? So
that's something we could update next year.
yeah, actually, right. So I just want to start out by asking if any of the counselors have questions about that first section, that's all the demographic part. And then if people on the steering committee have anything that you've noticed or maybe a data point that we didn't include that you think, hey, this would have been really important to include. I think we mentioned the steering committee, we wanted that, Grace, we wanted that map that shows like the firehouses and the schools and stuff. That was one of the things that for the community conditions part, we wanted to put something in that would be just a one-page kind of a graphic, but that just says these are all the resources that are here.
I
The
think the
police
service,
station, the libraries, we were gonna make a map that just showed all this stuff that's here.
I'm working on that for our website as well.
Oh, all right, great. All right. So Grace, you have a helper.
Elaine said she
Perfect.
was.
Yeah.
We'll
I have a
connect you.
spreadsheet ready.
What a surprise. So that was one thing we're definitely gonna add in that first section. Were there other questions or additions that people wanted in the first section?
Yeah, well, data wise, I wanted to see if we wanted to either add into the appendix or reflect in the seniors piece, the Meals on Wheels report data about the need, the hunger need.
Yeah.
That we got the report that we got from
Yeah.
Marianne.
Yeah, so that would be an appendix thing probably. But do we want to talk about, you mentioned seniors twice and it's only 15 minutes. So
I
do
did.
you want a section?
I mentioned, okay. I don't know. I'll let you know.
That's actually specific to the senior citizens. I don't see why we
In the
should find
data?
important. I mean, we have a very large elderly population, especially, and we do, and there is a lot of mentioning here about needing housing that's affordable for seniors too, especially.
I think that we could talk about transportation, we're going to talk about
Transportation, and the Meals on Wheels.
other kinds of resources.
Yeah, I think given how many of these things, when we talk about community assets and resources, touch upon how they specifically meet seniors' needs, it seems like, we need to,
Senior resource guide right in front of me.
we'll need to justify seemingly an inordinate focus on that demographic. I think it's a correct focus, so why not?
So maybe just a little pull out section, something of a different, so like a colored box or something around that, I think might be.
We may need to put something in there that we just don't have a clue what the micron
Right,
infusion is gonna be, so this reflects town as it is today,
Mhm.
much
Yeah.
demographics and some growth,
Mhm.
but it's not, 200,000 people joining the town of Manlius or something,
Right.
that, is all this offshoot, you can't envision that.
No, I think it should be based on what is
What's here.
actual,
But I
not
think it needs to
projection.
just be clear that
yeah.
And
And
that
I-
we recognize that there is some, at least projected growth
Right.
from.
And I think, by year 10, we may be seeing that, but we're not gonna see a huge influx in the near term. You?
We have some data. We have some data from the county. There are some guidelines that have been sent out and I think we should reference them, but not
That'd
necessarily.
be like a phase 2 kind of. thing.
Exactly, but we're phase 2, so being able to stick in where we are in the information placed in context with the county plan. The same way, just as a reminder, we have reviewed and continues to stay close to the documents that the Village of Fayetteville has produced for the comprehensive plan. Plan Onondaga, yeah, and Sarah has reached out to our neighboring municipalities too, so.
I think we definitely need to be prepared for growth, but not particularly because of one thing or the other. We know we'll be growing, but how like steady. I don't think it'll be like a sharp.
Yeah, steady versus short.
I think it's about understanding the current housing needs and then the potential housing needs and making a clear distinction between the two. I mean, we've heard a lot of people talking about housing needs right now that we do have. And there are some serious plans in place to address that, but also there's not this mandate of we need to build 1,000 new homes because of Micron. I think that's the balancing act there.
Yeah,
Because we look at just age in place needs, right?
yeah, it's more using what we have, not doing.
We got just two people here. Go ahead. Nicole.
What's the approximation that this plan would be covering? Like, when do you think you would have another committee together in the future? Like, is this 20 years or
Every
10
5
years?
years,
Yeah,
right?
5 years.
5 years, so then the next plan.
Well, no,
is
maybe
created.
10 years. before we-
So starting year 7, you would start like, or
Putting people together.
yeah, looking, reviewing. I mean, but one thing that you can propose is like an annual check-in on progress or some sort of report or.
Well, and I think that's what Kay was saying about the living document. I do think we should do that.
Yeah.
And when we move to that part, there needs to be an ongoing implementation strategy for this that's really not well articulated in this plan now. So that group would then, we would say there'd be so supposing this passes in May, every May, there'd have to be an annual report from that comprehensive plan saying this is what we've accomplished since then.
This is what we've accomplished. Here's the changes.
This is what this section we're gonna modify because something else happened and we have to change that.
That'd be great that we have a document to do that too.
Yeah.
Yes, there definitely has to be something to be able to measure
Right.
and track this.
Because when we look at the others, they, you know, they're pretty static, and then every few years there's an update, and it's usually around the resources of people that work on it. But if we're going to keep a standing effort, that every year there are some folks looking at it, and then it's something that we expect to look at and work on, and that's good.
So I think we should even put that in as a recommendation to make sure it doesn't just collect dust.
And that's sort of one of the things that we were suggesting in the past. It's almost like a disclaimer, right? Saying it's a living document, you can put in there, embed in there that like the living document and that the committee plans to meet whatever.
But
Yearly
just once a year and just check in, anyway,
To evaluate.
is the data still available? And if I could just ask for a clarification, John, you mentioned, you're hearing housing needs now. Are those housing needs reflected in the document?
I think so.
Like,
Based on my
what would you sum up the housing needs as being? Because I was looking at
Missing
housing
middle.
right there.
Missing middle.
Missing
It's more
middle.
lingo.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go there.
Basically, it's hard for people to leave their larger home and age in place into something that's smaller because what
The
they.
senior problem.
The senior problem, and yeah, and also caregivers, and people who are traveling in from other places that are more affordable to want to live and work here and not do so. So those are two issues, and yeah, and right.
Well, even like new families starting
new
out,
families.
like you can't.
That's.
So it's really that lower market. I don't want, and I don't mean lower as bad. What I mean is just,
Middle.
what I mean is a more, what you're saying is there is definitely a need for affordable housing, people that are not making, huge amounts, but somebody who's a nurse or somebody who's a caregiver, that they could afford to live here, right?
Yep.
And I don't know if that's, we want to be specific in that. And I-
Affordable housing is technically defined as paying 30% of your income towards housing. It's not necessarily, I make $16,000 a year,
right.
I want to afford to live
That's a good
wherever.
number. Is that number reflected? in-
Yes, it does say in here that affordable housing is 30% of the total annual housing.
So we do have that.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
I think when we're looking at housing, I didn't quite see that in here. The younger population who may not be buying homes right off the bat,
Renting.
apartments to live in, we want to attract that population. Especially, I was reading, I think it was on Syracuse.com today about the need for those younger workers to support Micron, so.
Sure,
I
who
think
don't
that's-
necessarily want to pursue the American dream of
Right.
a single
No,
family
it's
dwelling on a lot.
Different housing.
Yep.
Styles that they have now.
And I think there's a trend toward more renters anyway, that it ebbs and flows and that a lot of the older adults are happy to rent.
And I
Yes.
think when we talk about the missing middle, to Don's point, I mean, the 30% of adjusted median income or of total income is the definition of affordable housing. We're not really stuck talking about affordability being the only issue. It's really accessibility. I mean, if you're, a lot of people are spending more than that on their housing and it still doesn't seem affordable,
Yeah, and we mentioned the ADU law in there, and so having an ADU law that works for us as a community, accessory dwelling unit, permitting, avoiding sort of Airbnb overuse by having permits to do short-term rentals instead of really making sure that, the ADUs are about changing your own home to fit intergenerational living or caregivers, or having a separate house, that form of housing on your property.
Yeah, the EV housing as opposed to, like you said, short-term rental.
Housing versus short-term rentals, yeah. And we're lucky, there's a lot of good examples of how that's working in other places. The New York State was going to pass this broadly and didn't last year because there's a real concern about how to manage short-term rentals, and I think developers were also concerned about what the implications were for them, and so we can see it as a real solution, and I endeavor, along with Alyssa, we're interested in bringing forth a proposed piece of legislation to include that sooner rather than
So
later.
the ADU.
ADU, yeah.
ADU, okay.
Yeah.
Cause yeah, I thought we could like model it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Just basically an in-law suite.
And then must be right.
So I just wanted to thank Melissa for just pointing out that, because I did look at, it's got the 30% of household income in here, but nowhere in here, maybe again, I'm missing it, there's a lot here. Nowhere does it say how many 30%, how many housing meets that number right now in the town of Manlius.
Not necessarily specifically for town of Manlius, but I think I saw in here, or maybe I'm just recalling from seeing it in other places, but I think it does say in here that our county is severely overly housing.
You know, that was in Dan's report.
Yeah.
Right. but
We
if
could
you
pull
look-
that out.
But on this page, it just shows vacancy rate, but it really doesn't mean much.
And
It's
it
very,
should.
that's what we should have here is, because that's.
So
the problem.
Grace, what page are you on?
I'm on page 16. but
Okay, so
that's
Grace,
our-
make a note of that, the Onondaga County has some data we can add to that chart.
Well,
All right.
on page 18, oh, go ahead.
And, I don't know if that's possible, but it'd be good to say, this is the number we're trying to hit. We were saying we want affordable housing, but we don't really have a measurement for it. So we should say that right now, we may have an owner occupancy rate of 78% in the town of Manlius.
But don't forget, we can do, in our implementation plans, we
We
can
can
get
do
to
that.
those finer points.
Okay, maybe that's what we say, we're gonna work on the next year, getting to that, and that's where being a living document is, working towards that goal to measure that.
We want to be
Right.
careful not to be too prescriptive.
No, you're right, no, but as long as we somewhere note that our goal is to get to that 30%, it'd be good somewhere in the future document to identify that number.
But if you recall Dan's presentation, he had a chart with the percentage of people that they were paying 50% or more. It was
Yes.
very high.
Let's see if we could get that.
Yeah, if we could get, if he could break that out for us we could just put that in there and it would kind of say where we are compared to because the income, the average income for town of Manlius is higher than for the county. But even so, if people were paying 50%, maybe they're paying 40% here, but it's still too much.
But that info that we had was quantitative, that was very powerful, so you could see like exactly what he's getting at, not the,
So I'm wondering with the living document thing, could we put in here that the town board should review this every 5 years? So that's why it's like in the document.
Oh, yeah.
So that way future town boards are required to review it every 5 years. or
Well, that's,
10
and I
years.
think if you had language in there that kind of details, there's gonna be an implementation committee that submits a report to the town board once a year, and then every 5 years, the town board. Well, the idea is that those reports would be considered regularly and kind of in totality all the time. But you would have that 5-year opportunity to say, let's look at the reports, let's look at trends. And then you have an opportunity to say, like, hey, our plan says we have this type of need. What we've learned is we have this type of need, because we have to remember too, so much of this is this is a law that will then be used for seeker. And so if we don't have those statistics up to date, our plan might be descriptive of the problems we don't have or has changed.
Yeah, let me just clarify that piece. So the environmental protection, we have to, for any big project, even some small projects, we have a set of 18 questions we have to ask. And the last one is it in compliance with your comprehensive plan? So if any big developer wants to come in and do anything in the town, one of the questions they have to pass is this reflective of it? So in 5 years, if Micron's done something that we don't talk about, then the developer won't be allowed to do it because it's not consistent with our plan. So we have to make sure our plan stays current with what's going on in the world. That, may also include, perhaps additional, another community had done something with additional, erosion control requirements to say that over time, things got to be so bad that now a developer would have to not just meet the regular New York State law, but some additional step that they had to do for erosion control. So those are the kinds of things that over time we could add into something that says, because of circumstances that have happened, we're now tightening or loosening a certain component of this to reflect what's been going on.
Well, just understanding our housing needs over time. If 5 years from now you have a plan or, someone that wants to build something and it's calling for a certain amount of housing. If the plan says we need that housing, it does empower the town board, the planning board and everyone else in the process to say, yeah, it does meet our, whereas you might get pushback if, in 5 years, we say, actually, our housing needs aren't that severe. And you had a massive development come in, you could say it's actually not in line with, because we identified that we don't have a housing.
Yeah.
So I think having that kind of here and also included in the, kind of the summary stuff that, if you're just gonna read the first 10 pages, understanding the implementation and check-in process, I think will help when someone sits down to read it. And if they're only gonna read those first few pages and blurbs, knowing, oh, hey, I should actually keep, maybe it is worth investing time to read all 80 pages because this is gonna be something that happens every year.
So I'm gonna keep us moving along. So that was section 1. So let's go on to section 2, which is about the vision and the goals and all the millions of objectives. And I think the one thing I would like to just convey for this is that we do need an implementation. Right now, we have implementation items, action steps, but not who's doing them or when are they doing them or what tools do they need, what budget do they need. So there needs to be a follow-up, which I'd like to see in that preface that you guys are writing, something just to say, we understand that you can't just pull it out of here and think this is happening, that there's another step that the town is going to be required to develop a planning tool to say, these are the things we're going to tackle in 2024. These are the ones we're going to do in 2025. This is how much money we're going to put in the budget to do those things, because otherwise none of these things will happen. So there definitely needs to be an implementation process that's not outlined in the plan. The way
So this is the comprehensive plan, gives you the list, but then there's gonna be a implementation.
process, but which we can just, part of that, theoretically, you could say the budget is the implementation process, whatever you put in.
But you still need to know like when.
But you still wanna-
what do, or-
And you want to, we want the steering committee to help us prioritize
When we look
in
at
the
the,
community.
when we look at the implementation items, they are not unfamiliar.
Yeah.
Right, so I think it might make sense for us to work a little bit on grouping them already based on what things were already happening,
Yeah.
and then bring it to the steering committee to say, what do you think of this? Look at it, yeah.
Well, I think too, with having this conversation around a yearly kind of review of the plan, I think part of that yearly report would be, hey, for each of these focus areas, here are the implementation items that are untouched, have progress, done. And then also for things that aren't done, here's what, the group that is creating that yearly report, here are out of each vision, the top 2 things that we're seeing a need for based on changing statistics, or it's year 4 and haven't seen any movement on this. And it's important that we consider that as a way to kind of, it's like, I'm just looking at the first one, there's 19 items. Do we accomplish all 19 in 5 or 10 years? I don't know. But is it important that we're calling out the ones that need attention year after year, or the ones that have become a higher priority, or just the things that in the day-to-day operations of town hall over the course of a few years might just be accomplished?
Yeah, I don't think that these particular in goal 1, I don't think these are hugely ambitious for the most part. These are things that are aligned with what we're up to. And so I think that that's, maybe it's different as we go along and some of the others,
Well, I
the
think,
2 were there.
yeah, I think there's a lot of these things,
Yeah,
but there's, I guess part of what I tend to fall into operations very quickly. And I lose my vision very quickly and get right to the bit. So I'm gonna stay in my vision now.
You really need to pass the document
Yes,
before you can be like, let's do it.
yeah, exactly.
Because we need the document.
Yes. And we need this marching orders.
And you need the
from-
list, yeah.
Yeah, so I think I'm gonna stay out of my implementation mode right
No,
here.
no implementing.
But I think things like revamping the whole zoning code is a much bigger project than, applying for a grant for something,
Yeah.
So I just think we need, they're not the same size, I guess. What I say.
Well,
Right?
we can't,
this group can't say you need to make a sidewalk from here to Manlius.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because who's got the $1 billion to do it?
Mhm.
So you guys may say, you know what, we can't do that, but we can bang out 40 of these things
Mhm.
because they're
Yeah.
less budgets, they're less efforts, they're this, they're that, whatever.
Rick, you have to check out the new sidewalk program that Alina's put together. It's incredible.
Well, you know,
But I
maybe,
think-
maybe it's a timing thing. It can't be done this year because the grant isn't available to the bond, whatever. I don't know. Nobody knows those details
Right.
like you guys.
Right, yeah.
So for us to say you need to do this first,
But I think what the document can say is that residents would like a sidewalk to Manlius. And then at least when the grant comes along, we can say that the residents want it. However, when
Not
we did that
like-
before, they didn't want it.
No, no. Sidewalks are a bad example because we have so much information about how the process should work. But I hear what you're saying in terms of what's been articulated. So Grace, this is so much of this in this section is just in narrative form. I wonder if this makes sense to do in a grid form.
I
So
like the list.
you like the list?
For the objectives and then how to reach it, I think
Mhm.
it's very clear.
How, yeah,
I
I
have
think
a
that
grid
the
later on, like with the other one.
I think that the whole, how they're listed doesn't feel like it's in any order, and I just feel like more order to
So
the
what you could do
implementation.
is, like, under our vision. I feel like you could have a page where you list all the goals on one page before you get to them, maybe? I don't know what you're saying.
I'm talking about implementation items, the way they're just listed.
I agree. Organizationally,
Yeah.
it makes it clear.
Yeah.
And I think if you to follow along, you have to often like jump down and back and jump back, you know what?
Yeah, I hear that, but I mean, maybe even alphabetize them or
So,
convene
so
or.
let's think about it. But one way would be to have the objective, so the objective is to spread public awareness and then pick which implementation spread public awareness. And
Oh,
just
good.
change the page. It would be the exact same page, but just ordered differently.
Yeah, that works.
So see if that meets your need
Yeah, I'll
before
look at
going
that.
all the way to a grid
Yep.
thing.
That, I'll take that on as an action thing to do. We'll look at.
Because what we may find is there's no actions for some of these
Yeah,
Yeah, and that
objectives.
would instantly give
And
you-
then that we should like highlight that.
that's a great idea. Great, thank you.
So that would ruin Grace's color coding. but
I
we can-
know,
We can, we
Grace.
can probably live through it. Okay. Other things on the goals and implementations. Marissa, one of the things we wanted, and Kay, both of you, one of the things that we wanted to think about was if all of this talk about additional affordable housing, if it's for older adults, that's sort of fine, but if it's for these young families, they're gonna have children. And where does the interaction, when does an apartment complex become a problem for the school district?
When you're adding a lot of children to the building.
You can't.
But we can't not let them come, so I get.
Right, you can't really, well, actually, there was, we were gonna have a board meeting tonight, and we weren't able to, because one of our board members wanted to discuss, and this may be something that's submitted during public comment, how new construction of homes or multifamily developments are assessed, that they could be assessed for impact fee, be paid to the district to maintain, and expand their buildings to accommodate new families, as well as, no granting of tax exemptions or pilot agreements that are for, because of our school budgets being so challenging and continue to be challenging. So we haven't made a decision about putting that out in public comment, but that is something the board and the district is discussing right now. I think, it would be helpful to look at, any grants that either district is, considering in the future, any programs or projects that they're gonna be doing, to include them in the, plan. For example, electric buses are the huge thing that we're all going to be doing. I just came out from a conference where they were discussing, it's very important to be able to show buy-in from your community. So if that's in the community plan under sustainability or transportation, that the town is supportive of that when we apply for any grants, that's gonna be something that's gonna be very important.
Is that in our climate action plan?
Yes.
I'm also looking at page 45, which is the modern mobility networks, and it does say number 9, implementation items. Transition municipal vehicles to electric, so maybe we just, maybe
Yeah,
that
cool.
specific part is expanded to say all the municipalities within the town.
Yeah,
Right,
so-
so maybe you cite that New
so
York State has a
Grace, you
law
just want
that
to add school buses to that?
have to be elected by, I can't remember the date off the top of my head right now.
And that's hugely expensive.
It's very, very, very good.
Yeah, the climate action plan is another one of those plans that we talked about being created in tandem with the comprehensive plan, and it fits within the comprehensive plan in a lot of ways.
And then some sidewalk stuff is mentioned in there as well.
So Kay and Bill, if you're listening, you know, there's the conversation about Manoa Farms, that's really that middle housing.
Right.
But that will probably be families that will impact your school.
So one of the, I wrote down for our next like work session for us, was that it would be important to include our implementation or somewhere in there is that we continue to cultivate a partnership with our school districts where we have these open discussions about things and what the offset would be or impact would be for the districts. So I think just in a vague way like that is just saying, continuing to foster the relationship with both school districts. It's important to continually communicate changes, you know, and how the impact could affect.
Yeah, it's almost like a notice going out, hey, you know, for either a meeting or feedback, listen, we're approaching our time where we look at the comprehensive plan. What are the key, related to the plan, what are the key things that you from your perspective as a school district, as a village, you want to make sure we update and consider?
Right.
And then I think we could also refer developers, if someone comes in and says they want to build an apartment complex, is to include the school district at the very
And that's why
beginning.
it's not almost like that is an implication point, because we're talking about this and everything that help, you know, welcoming and healthy neighborhoods. We put there in a bullet point, the little snippet about school districts and talking to both, make sure that.
Because definitely in the incentives for multifamily housing, there are these pilot agreements and also incentives around an assessment. So where we have to be very deliberate, you know, or intentional in our conversations to say, okay, if the town is wanting to incentivize this and the school district wants to make sure they're not losing revenue, how are we working together to support that?
Yeah, and the more important fact is making sure we have faith in our schools for any children coming in. Because, you know, it takes a lot longer for a school district to get approval to expand a building than it does for a developer to put up a project. And not only, I mean, our footprint is such that there's not a lot of room to expand on some of the buildings.
Right, without those big capital projects.
Or, I mean, not room to expand on the building, that means finding another space, and there are not a lot of spaces, trust me, where you could put a new building.
Yeah, we know.
We're aware.
But is the population of students going up right now?
Um,
Because in here it says it's going down, but my understanding is the schools are kind of, at least FBM is kind of
our
packed.
schools are pretty full in Africa.
Well, in
And we're
here, it's-
actually, we've added pre-K, and we have to look at how that's gonna impact, because that's gonna, right now, it's not all children are not in pre-K, but that's the goal, that every kid will be able to go in pre-K. Where are those kids going to be? Like, right now, we have outside providers, but people come into the community and they want their kids to be in the schools and taught by different teachers, so.
I'm wondering if that should be under, because under population, it says the enrollment within the Fayetteville, Manlius, Syracuse fell by 7% and 3% from 2011 to 2019. But really, it's not falling, it's going.
If you look at the space that we have in our buildings, I think that would be a very important statistic to put in there. You know, saying the population fell, but if you go into our buildings, there's not room. Like, we're adding on to the high school now.
And so is that because services are increasing? So you have less students, but you have more, because this is saying you have less students.
I wouldn't say our population has gone down that much, and I don't have like. numbers for you. Just thinking about the classroom sizes, because we want to maintain smaller classroom sizes, and thinking about all of our buildings. We're struggling right now to think about our space and how we're gonna accommodate the kids that we have now.
Well, I'm seeing it with my students, with my two boys, how crowded it is. So that's why I was surprised to see the numbers going down. So if the numbers going down, why is there a space constraint?
Let's see if we can reconcile that with the school district so that we're not putting
That's what I'm
this data
saying.
in without knowing.
Yeah, last meeting, the gentleman said that we're 90%.
Yeah.
So
The last meeting that we.
I found that statistic really surprising, especially because we're avoiding it. You know, Lidford, I'm surprised, I thought we were kind of gaining.
Yeah, so Grace, let's just double check where that data came from and cross-reference it with the district.
And
This increase of pre-K would be a whole nother set of kids that probably weren't counted in the previous time, so that would be one reason.
Could we, Kay and Marissa, would you be willing to help us get that data from the
Oh, yeah,
schools?
I'll get that for you.
That'd be great, if you're willing to help us with ESM.
getting it.
I don't know where that came and I just assumed it was from them and I knew that they didn't fall either. So I was sort of like, I thought that we were kind of flat and sustained at the same level.
It might be countywide, it might be a larger
Okay.
number and just too big and not
So
specific.
just check on the enrollment rate for what kind
Like
of.
5 years.
And kind of a modeling, you must have modeling that the districts are doing and.
We do a census and then we have a report, a projection report.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, that would be huge.
Census and projection. Census and projection.
And we can look at the current, like what we have right now in each building. Like
Great.
how many classrooms would we be able to access? The answer is not many.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much, although we've just renovated, so maybe you've got. more
We
space.
also have something to it too, so
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if that's gonna comprise of that, but.
Well, officially, we have also some students who are in the town of Manlius who go to JD and some who go to Chittenden.
Yeah,
So
and
it's
I
not
think
perfect.
they all end up at the same high school, so I think that's all in the town of Manlius, so I think it's fine. I don't think it's fine.
So I just want to move on to the last section. This is the future land use section. There were 7 categories of that, and I think we had a lot of conversation in the steering committee about open space and agricultural, wanting to be sure that we did preserve that. And then sort of simplifying the residential communities and looking at more mixed, so less segregation of housing and commercial and a little bit more of the in-between, but most of the in-between is in the villages. So there's not really a whole lot of places in the town where the in-between stuff really fits. But we wanted to say it was feasible in case there was something where we did want to put it.
Yeah, like the shopping the shopping centers that we have that are just outside the villages
Right.
are the closest examples. So Enders Road area and Town Center.
So if you were to
Family
take,
Center.
I don't know what it's called, I probably should, I think it's Settlers Village, is it? The little plaza that's at the very beginning of Mallard's Landing, opposite the hardware store. Like
Oh, yeah,
that,
Where True Value.
yeah, so opposite that, it's like this Williamsburg plopped in the middle of Manlius there, so that, if that had apartments in it, like nobody would mind.
Like the
So,
way Eastern Hills is changing.
I know, they're getting apartments over there.
Yeah.
They're doing that.
so that's the kind of thing I'm thinking, like, there are some spaces where maybe somebody would say, yes, this does make sense to me. Even though the majority of the town, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
How does that apply with form-based?
Yeah, when we change the zoning, that would, but we need this to guide us to say, yes, we want you to change the zoning that way.
So the trends are to go away from form-based zoning, which is just
Two formers.
two form-based housing or form-based zoning instead of, what do we call it?
Use space.
Use-based, right? So shopping at residential and thinking about something that's more the new urbanism of housing and shopping.
It's also, I think, how people think about it.
How people think about
Yeah.
it, right?
Like, what do you want? You want to feel that when you're moving through your community, things are consistent, they're clear, things are where they need to be. And it's a lot less of, okay, at this line, on this side of this line, it's gonna be commercial, on this side of this line, it's gonna be residential. People, I think, when you have people that are approaching this without a background in planning, you don't think that way, where there's clear lines in the sand. You think, I want to be in a community that has this type of commercial, this type of recreational,
Right.
and then
No more
residential. built
Whitewaters
in.
Park, Whitewaters.
Yeah.
Office
Like
Park
that
that's-
stark contrast.
Right, right.
So are there thoughts about that? Because I want to make sure, that was an area where I think there's a lot of conversation around what do we mean by this mixed use thing? And I just want to make sure that people have a chance to share their thoughts about that. And if the counselors have questions about what that might mean.
So is this like, like on that map from page 50, that's kind of like the future idea for the
Mhm.
town?
The flu map.
Yeah. blue.
It looks like certain, the red parts have blue,
Yeah, so you can see there's quite a lot of the green blob over on the eastern section, trying to keep that. And then.
Page 24.
Page 50. And then there's the two different colors of yellow. I don't know, yellow and then gold, that are all sort of generally residential. So we're really only looking at the redder sections and the purpley sections as being either green or housing. So it's not very much of the town, but you can see it sort of sporadically around. So I think that's the question of, it wouldn't be a concentrated area anywhere. It would be this sort of transitional section where.
I think so much of this is playing off of how it has developed over time and understanding that we want those lines to blur. And like this, in my mind, this map is where you come back in 5 and 10 years and you can ask yourself, well, this is what we thought we wanted to do. How has it developed? Using the comprehensive plan as a guiding tool each way, because what the map looks like now and what the zoning map looks like in 10 years is going to tell us a lot about what that next 10 years would look like. You have in here a future corridor study, so you could envision this where there may be more red, there may be more purple in that corridor if we find out that that's how the residents want it to develop. Whereas the ones that are near like Fayetteville and Manlius, those are pretty self-evident because that's been the natural process over time.
And most of it is along some kind of a busier road.
Yeah.
So you get there, but like Saintsville Road is industrial because that's what was there.
Yeah.
Like there is along the railroad tracks and it grew up, so there's no reason why it's there, it just is, and nobody's gonna make a change, so.
But I think if I'm, if I'm a developer, I'm talking to a developer, this is the type of map that I can give them to say, hey, this is what this is in general, what people are looking for. And this is a really easy way to say, well, if you're looking at something that is green and you want to put commercial there, I'm not saying don't have the conversation, but it is going to be a pretty serious conversation.
Gives them the heads up.
Because you're gonna bump into this, whereas if you find, a red area and you say, I would like to build a mixed use development there, that process will be easier because you're gonna have the plan to support the need for that development.
Okay, does that make sense to people? Are people comfortable with that? Because this is really, this map is what is probably gonna be what a developer
Yeah, this is the road.
goes to,
Plan.
and so they're not gonna read 50 pages, they're gonna go right to this map. So just wanna make sure people are sort of comfortable with that, or whether we wanna say more about that in the wording that we're developing before we do the
We
final.
might want to say a word now about the future corridor study portion. Sarah, do you want to, and Kay had been involved in that too, right?
So the corridor idea was that, I think what Rick said at the very beginning, we don't know what Micron's gonna do for us. So we wanted to say, if Micron comes down Route 481 and they want to develop along Route 481, that we would want to proactively address that. To say, these are the areas where it's allowed, these are the areas it's not allowed, or this is the infrastructure that would have to be developed in order to permit this kind of development to happen. So the idea is that we wouldn't wait for a warehouse to come and say, I want to be here. We would be pre-planning as it becomes closer to say, you can put an Amazon warehouse over there, but you can't put it over here.
Well, and also, Kay lives near this area and residents will be able to have an opportunity to feed in to say, here's what we want. And so it's a focus on this area to say, okay, this has been a place where there are a few businesses, it floods, it floods here, here, and here. So here's the on the ground reality of this.
So is this just like it's just saying this is the future area we want to start?
Yep. And I think and we didn't even plan on that until we heard the Micron news to say that this is, if they end up spreading further, they're gonna look at spreading on the highway.
We have traffic.
But on the big picture, right? I mean, the only place you can expand in the town of Manlius is going east. Right? And now you've got traffic issues big time through Manlius and through Fayetteville. Or you go north, which is gonna start taking away all your farmland and so, but everything, there is nothing to the south.
Right.
And there's nothing to the west.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's it. That's all you got. So it would have to hit the acid test of what are the capacities of the schools? Can the fire services handle something in
Is
that
there water and
area,
sewer, you know, all those things?
and the traffic? I mean, it's, you know, what you guys do, I mean, that's what you do.
But even without, I mean, that area, even without like considering Micron, is that area needed as a study? Already.
Yes.
Okay.
And
I would
so,
say so.
yeah, so Don has his.
This might be different, but I'm getting, you know, talking about catching up with your mixed use. And if you go way out in East Tennessee, you know, the existing land use is not so red. But if you go right to the border of, you know, Madison, it's all red in the future land use.
Yeah.
And is that what you want? I mean, I would think people living on.
That's where it is
Tennessee,
now.
There'd be a lot of traffic.
That's the landscaping area, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's
the
also
landscaping,
next
it's the gas station.
It's Megnan Farms, right to where the Maple Leaf is, and you go a bit, yeah.
There's vacant land there.
There's vacant land
But
there.
it's already developed.
It's already commercial.
No, there's a bunch, but yeah, you can speak to the whole, right here. Where you-
Yeah, and I guess that's what I had a question on that, like, how is what you're talking about, like, how are, that's the land I thought of immediately. But how do we stop, like, Burger Kings or Taco Bell's versus, you know, strips that you're talking about that have more small businesses or delis, like, how are
Well,
we
and
able?
that's, I think, addressed a lot in moving to form-based zoning. So that things, it's more important about how they fit the character of the neighborhood, but then also, I mean, just in the design standards and guidelines to say there's no drive-throughs, that'll keep a lot of that out of there, because you don't want that. Whereas, you know, when you're closer to a community, the design guidelines and everything in this plan, plus the implementation that's gonna come from it, is going to say, this is what people are looking for. So, you know, there might be a Burger King, but it's not going to look like a standalone Burger King. It would look integrated into it. It wouldn't have a drive-through. It would look different in a way that works with it. Odds are, you're not gonna see that development because that's not what they want to develop. What you're gonna do is you're gonna say, hey, these are the design standards. This is how your business or residential development has to fit in. It has to have sidewalks, so you're already saying certain things aren't gonna work here, and the things that are gonna work, they're gonna fit with the character that everyone's looking for. So rather than developers coming in and saying, I wanna do this different thing, we're gonna say, the plan says you can't do that.
So if I'm a person who's Nicole's neighbor and I'm looking at this map and I'm like, ooh, I want to make sure I'm active. What do I do if I know I want to preserve the character of, I want to advocate in circle favor or something? How does looking at this map help the average resident is what we want to be able to articulate too. We'd say,
And I'm actually concerned about that red lab. I think I'm gonna look
Because
at
I
it.
know in a previous meeting, it was brought up that potentially, if our area needs a hospital, that was an area to identify for a hospital to go. So
Yeah, 'cause that
I
was-
drive by that every day, so I'm like, how would a hospital? fit
Yeah,
right
because
here?
that was the zoning study that Keith did that identified that
that's
place.
right.
I think I want to revisit that.
I think we need to lay over existing zoning
Mhm.
onto this so that people can see. This is future land use, but we need to basically be able to lay over a version that shows current.
Because I think,
It follows current.
so I think one of the reasons that got picked, Nicole, is because we thought that had sewer and it doesn't. Because Chittenden doesn't have any capacity. So I think that might not be read in the end, so
Yeah.
make a note.
Ask a question that's gonna switch topics. For the design standards, how does that factor
That's a
in?
whole nother category.
Now, is it included?
No, we need to say that's another
Because I think
implementation step.
that's the huge thing is where they come in and say the sidewalks are required, that has to be in here.
Well, and that's gonna be from the implementation. We now have an understanding of what the community is looking for.
Like visually.
And like, so if you look in the appendix, you have the ranking of like all the different streetscapes and
Yeah.
businesses and stuff like that. So we've collected a lot of that data, and I think by being part of the appendix, we can push back and say, well, we don't have design guidelines yet, but you can clearly see this is what the community
Yeah, because
favors.
that first step did do a lot of that, but we didn't articulate it as town of Manlius
So
design.
we need
guidelines.
to still pass a comprehensive plan, but then still come up with design standards.
Yeah, just like, so the prescription from the plan is redo the zoning and develop design standards. But both of those are heavily informed by the fact finding and the actual contents.
So we don't need to do all the appendix work again,
No, yeah.
so we'll just use the same appendix for the other.
The existing zoning is on page 28, so it's so far away from page
Right.
50. I think we might want to repeat
Yeah, like even smaller, like.
Just repeat it
reference
next to it, so you can see it. close
Even just
together.
side by side, I think makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense.
Grace, did you hear that for 2050? Thank you.
Got it.
Yeah, because I knew we had it.
Yeah, because you have commercial out there.
There's commercial there, and I think that's what triggered it, but that commercial is Aspinall's, which does not look commercial.
No, it's a land use.
Yeah, so I think that's.
But that I think
misleading.
speaks to the whole idea, and I think maybe even informs the zoning overhaul is you can't have a mixed use type of district. You're gonna need kind of a, maybe you call it urban or residential mixed use versus rural or agricultural mixed use. Because you don't want to say, hey, put in 3-story buildings with residential up top. You're saying, we want businesses that fit the agricultural theme.
Right.
So you could see certain businesses going in there. And so you don't want to necessarily say no development, but you want to say, this is the form we're looking for. So if you can make your business fit in that form, that's great. But if you need 50 parking spaces, it's not gonna fit the form.
Right.
Because the information about zoning is concentrated and defined really well from in the earlier section. 26, 27 definitions, and then 28. I don't think it would be the end of the world to put a preview of the FLU, maybe even back earlier, and just say,
Yeah.
go forward too. So rather than move the existing to the 50, have 50, page 50, that map be a preview and say like, go to blah, blah, blah section to see the rationale.
One thing too is that we're looking at it as a printed document, and a lot of people are gonna be looking at it on the screen. And so if you just include links to in the live document, you can click right to that. And then you will have much easier time navigating.
Also too, I think it would make a lot of sense for us to come up with a place on the website
Yeah.
where you can say, show me, what looks better, 1 or 2, 1 or 2, like we can pretty easily implement that. on those devices. Yeah, exactly. But like, yes, it would be great if they're on the same page or even next to each other, but like, we can also accept the fact that we can put somewhere on the website that has 2 pictures and you pick which one you're seeing.
On that topic too, these boards, I was gonna leave.
Yeah.
It's like, it's such a simpler way to look at it. Like you have the bigger document on, okay, then you have.
So for the 10-page version, it might just
Like
be
a
those boards.
10-page version, something like that.
Okay, so did you all hear that in Grace, what Lane was saying about how the boards are almost like the 10-page PowerPoint, like the 10-page
Yeah.
preview almost is gonna come before, it's gonna be a part of the document, but also separate.
So, yeah, like you pull out some information that kind of a simplified version.
Like a
And
Cliff
then-
Notes. Yeah. like
Yeah,
that.
and then you can go into the deeper dive if you want.
And we could, so let's think about this. So Grace, one possibility for that would be, one, there'd be a brochure that's just the 10 pages. But the other is that like the chapter heading for each of the big pages could be the little page. Like, this is all the stuff in this chapter.
Yeah. I would think of it in a digital.
Yeah.
I think that's gonna be the important piece, is making sure that
Because it's gonna be, so I'm gonna search, where can I put Taco Bell? And see what I get up.
Well, I think a lot of it is just understanding that, yes, we need some print materials that are going to be useful, because that is how you get someone to go from not knowing about the comprehensive plan to going to the website, is having some print material that we can have in the libraries, in the town hall, at events, that people can pick up and go, I am now interested in this, and that's a good jumping off point. But I think when it comes to how this is digested by a citizen who is actively paying attention and wants to learn more, that's when we have to think about
So
it more in a
that's,
digital.
so we
form.
probably need to really think about a trifold more than anything. else.
Yeah,
Just
as
a
I-
lead behind
Yeah,
it.
and you gotta think of it like a piece of marketing material to say.
Lane's jam. So I want to ask you, Elaine, if you're willing to help us with Grace, think about user interface with
Well,
this material.
Yeah, I actually really wanted those graphics.
Yeah,
If I can get those, then I'll. have
yeah.
them.
Grace,
Okay.
can we work with Elaine on that?
All right, I'm just noticing, I'm
Yeah.
already over time.
Alright.
So, other thoughts from the steering committee?
Just to piggyback on what you were just saying, I mean, I think it's great to have those paper materials and all those locations. But, one thing we've been discussing at the board lately is our young people are not going to, they're not picking up those papers, so. They're on social media, they're getting their information online, so something similar that's going to reach those, that population, I think. is
So
important.
we need to create a series of TikToks talking about the comprehensive plan.
Hey, you know what? You might reach a bunch of people that way. Not
Hey,
even if
I'm
you-
look, we're actively looking for partners.
To reach that younger demographic, and I don't just mean like high school kids, I mean that 20, whatever.
Yeah.
You're going to have to do a lot of different things. They're not
For the
that are
rollout.
digitally based.
We're just trying to get our website like working and functioning and then we'll. bring
But I think it's important to think about that, even and understanding this is a long-term plan. Over the next year, asking ourselves, how can we turn this into digestible social media posts?
Yeah.
So like, how do you turn this into a 20-part posting thing that happens on Instagram, Facebook, on Nextdoor, and then meets everybody where they're at? And yes, actually and like, we can ask ourselves, maybe it is incumbent on us to do a 12-minute YouTube video. That is how someone would consume the vast majority of this information.
This is that long.
But that's the thing, is like, when we think about the trifold piece, again, it's with everything we do with communication. If that trifold piece existing in a physical paper copy is important,
It needs to be a digital.
where are all the other places where that trifold needs to exist?
That's a
And
good
then
point
it's-
we have to have in
Yeah.
there too, that this information is going to live in ways that people can access it.
Yeah.
And then actually, there's an accessibility standard too, because that's something we want our website to be accessible, so.
And if we can get it on our website, then it's much easier to bring it from the website to any other. format.
Absolutely, yeah.
I
Okay.
think that's the drive the digital portion by getting it on the website, and then from there, it's a small jumping off.
Stuff.
point
And you
to
can
get it
stick
out.
videos in that you can then use that.
So what we're saying is, it's not gonna be a comprehensive plan, that's a downloadable PDF alone. We
Okay.
really want it to be a
It
dynamic.
has to be that, but it's
presentation
gonna be
of
other
it.
things too.
Right.
So any other and Dave, you too, any other comments from the group? Anybody want to, we lost our other attendee, but.
So what is it that you're proposing we do to go forward?
I think we're looking at, oh, that was the other thing I had to do tonight, is confirm the date. Can you guys all come for a steering committee meeting and not with us on the 10th of May at 5 o'clock? For the last steering committee meeting.
I have a question on that too,
Mhm.
because it's on our agenda tonight to do schedule a public hearing.
Mhm.
We're not gonna have the actual document, or we're still on the draft.
It's still on the draft, but there'll be a new draft by then, but
So you wanna know what date you're gonna have what you're saying?
When's the final coming out, so they can comment on the.
well,
final?
they're commenting, yes, they'll comment on the draft in process. Then they will send a draft to us for our hearing, which will be a month later.
Right.
May 10th, what time to?
5 to 6. Okay.
So the agenda doesn't have us setting up,
After May
it's more of an informational piece.
There's still, it's for the steering committee to vote to conclude the draft. So Grace, this is really a task for you, is at what point can you, after they give you their input, we're closing public comment on the 21st. That gives you a week to redo a draft, to get it to all of them to deliberate on theirs.
So there'll be a draft.
There'll be another
request for
draft for
review.
you to approve when you meet on May 10th.
Oh, okay, so how do we, I guess there's things that I want
Yeah,
to edit before we get to them.
exactly.
So
And
do I
that's,
just contact Grace and talk to
yeah, so
about
Grace,
it?
any things that you want to edit, you send it to comprehensive planning, Grace will get it, but so will everybody else.
So the
Because
way
we-
of doing that is you could mark up something and take a picture of it and send it to Grace. Is that okay, Grace? That would
Yep.
work.
Yep,
Or
that would be fine.
You
Yeah,
can do what you need to do as long as you convey it.
I thought May 10th was going to be for us, to like actually have discussions
Hmm.
before a draft. is
Yes.
Put together.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. No, that's what I think.
Like the draft is gonna be done before we get together and make that the new draft.
And what is that draft?
All right, so let's stop, because that's two totally different things. So if you guys are gonna talk together on May 10th, then Grace will not do the draft until after May 10th.
I would like.
Yes, that's what I
Okay.
think. Yeah, that's what we were thinking that meeting was.
Okay.
I
That's
guess it's the time sensitive.
what,
meeting.
yeah, that's no,
I think-
we can live
I think,
with 10.
I think the only goal would then be to say, within the month, can that final meeting happen? So that we can ideally get this, because I think, assuming there's like 2 weeks after that or 3 weeks after that, that puts us. Which I think once you have that meeting, we can say we're scheduling a public hearing, understanding that we're still waiting a week or two for the final draft. We'll schedule it an extra meeting out, so rather than 2 weeks ahead, we'll schedule it 4 weeks out. So that people, because this is where I don't want to get lost is, there's a lot of energy right now with the public. And I want to just make sure that we can schedule our public hearing out far enough. So that people have the time to say, I'm gonna read the final draft, I'm gonna collect everything, because odds are, we will be holding that public hearing open Because there'll be a conversation that happens and then we'll have further discussion and then more residents might come to the second one. That puts us though, I think,
The end of June.
end of June, beginning of July, which is fine.
Which is still.
If that's fine, I like enough, I would just propose that we can keep May 10th how we want to keep it, but I would want another meeting before that, if you were
Okay.
gonna do that.
Yeah,
For us
why
to get
not? I
together
mean,
And we
before
can set, you know, if you
talk
guys,
about another.
we can host you here, but you can meet at the library, you can meet wherever you guys want.
Right, so I don't wanna hold you up, if you wanna have a draft for us to all review on May 10th, that's fine, I would just.
No, I would,
It sounds like it'll be best to have to give you guys, first off, you have whatever it is, a month between now and then to continue this conversation. Then sit down on the 10th and say, hey, these are all the things, because that'll be kind of the time to coalesce everything, work with Grace and the counselors to say, okay, now we know what we need, the changes are to that draft. Then you schedule another meeting, you say, yep, this is the draft, it reflects what those conversations. It gets delivered to us, and we've already scheduled a public hearing so that we can put it out and put a lot of effort into saying, hey, this is the final draft. Here is the meeting where those final comments are gonna be required.
Okay, so our time, let's just be clear about this timeline one more time. We know that May 10th, the steering committee is going to meet from 5 to 6. Actually, just before that, April 21st is the last time to comment on this draft. Grace, what does that mean for Grace and what Grace is doing to coalesce information?
so I think Grace can be making can be marking up along the way with the comments that she's already
There's
received.
a lot that happened tonight that needs to be acted on.
And all the written recommendations that we've gotten. So I think Grace can be having a beta copy kind of going on the side without changing what this document is. But at the same time, after you meet on the 10th, how many days do you think it would take you to give Grace your notes of that to say, this is our official consensus of what?
I got a question. So there are comments, there have been comments all through, but the comments have not been adopted by the committee. So what are we adding to this?
So,
draft?
so that's part of what I'm asking. So when you get together on the 10th, if you say, okay, these are all the letters we received, we like this comment, we don't like that comment, like that's gonna be the notes that we have to
Right.
convey.
And how are we gonna get those relayed to us?
You just get an email with all the,
With like 3 or 4, right?
all the ones we're getting, we're sending them to you. So, and like Nicole, if you send us something,
No,
it
there-
will also be distributed to
There
others.
are library comments too.
All right, so we'll have to get those.
Because I know you said a dozen, but we only had.
So we need to get for your meeting, the library, from the 21st, we need to coalesce and get all the library comments to you too.
Thank you.
Heather, when did you say the last day was for public comment?
On this draft, April 21st.
I would think that we would be able to come to a consensus in that meeting. I don't know if we can do it in an hour.
No, I
But
think.
I think it's important, you know, too, if the public comment stops on the 21st, that'll be a clear line in the sand to give to the steering committee, hey, here are all the comments.
Right, that's what we're
Also understanding what happened in this meeting, and then I would hope that by the 10th, there could be some communication to say, hey, we've got a sense of what needs to change, and then the 10th will be a lot more understanding this conversation and the public comments. Here's the key things we wanted to address.
Yeah, it would be great if you all were ready with your sort of prepared coalescing of your own ideas, what you know about this meeting, last meeting. comments. Yeah, that would
I
be
thought that was today, so.
Thank you.
Anything else? So we're not gonna do anything until after the 10th, because we gotta wait to hear from you if you're comfortable moving forward or if you need more time.
And my assumption is that also on the May 10th agenda for the town board, we will have something on there to set a date for a public hearing for the first June meeting. I think that's, because I can't imagine we'd be able to turn something around in 2 weeks to have a public
But
hearing on
the
it.
question is whether we can't set a public hearing without the draft done.
That's really the
I think it's gonna be the second.
We're waiting for the actual document, that's all.
Well, maybe what we'll do then is on May 10th, if we have a sense that the meeting was productive and then there will be a draft coming, then we'll say, we're not setting a date, but we're making it clear that we're holding space on the first June agenda. And then if we have to, and then we formally set it, but that way we can at least say in a meeting on, in the public record, we will be having this public hearing. It is not set because we don't have the document.
Two things. One, you have to officially, as the steering committee, vote on a draft. And you also have to have that draft sent to the
We did that.
county. And
They've already sent it.
They're cool. Okay, so they're like, good, you're doing a good job.
Yeah, I don't know, the county was fine with you. you don't need to go back to them. They
Did
love.
we forward that to them?
I
The
mean,
county, we will.
All I saw was the GML referral. It looks like they put you as the point of contact for the GML referral, so
Okay.
we will get the rest.
So I'll get it, okay, so I'll share that when that comes.
Okay.
Steering committee vote, so
So
the
then-
steering committee vote might be on the tenth, but what I hear from Nicole is it might not be on the tenth.
It probably won't, because it sounds like we're gonna have. Yeah, and then you're gonna have to see the draft, and then, so we'll assume that it'll happen sometime, but what I think is important is we will start, I think it's, I wanna make it clear. In June, we will have a public hearing on the draft comprehensive plan, and that's where, you know, and understanding the timeline. Likely, it will be held open until the first July.
If we need more than an hour on the tenth, can we meet earlier? Because I know I have a 6:30 meeting, so I can always stay.
We can always have this before, yeah.
Yeah, do you want to?
Because you guys meet at 6 that day too, right?
6:30,
6:30.
but yeah, we can,
Yeah,
we
we
Do you want to
can,
meet at 4:30 or something?
Like,
You can communicate.
I can close the store. Great.
so
Direct them.
what is my instruction, 4 or 4:30?
Yeah. you can-
To contact four.
Okay, we'll hold the room at 4, come when you can,
Okay, great.
4 PM on 5/10.
That'll-
The, climate action plan draft is out today also for comment.
Great.
So we can share that. for comment.
Yeah, they've been reviewing that, and what's great is that BNL, Grace and Keith have been working with Amanda in the crosswalk. That's in this document highlights the sort of shared actions. So that's where the steering committee is pretty up to speed on the climate action plan.
Okay,
All right, thank you, everybody.
everybody good? Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much, steering committee and folks for coming.